got a PAT coming up sooner than you know, actually. This PAT is coming up. So, welcome to Social Studies 9. This is an outline for our year end. So, here's what we know. We know that this PAT is going to be 50 multiple choice questions, and it's going to be in 2 booklets. It's a source-based exam. One of the booklets, you'll have your questions. The other booklet, you are going to have your sources, and it's designed to take you 90 minutes. That's an hour and a half, but you get an additional 90 minutes should you need it. And for our school, we have decided that this is going to count as 15% of your entire grade. So I've got some examples down here on the bottom. You can pause, you can take a look at how this would affect your mark, depending on how you do. We also know a couple of other things. Throughout the years, we've been paying attention, very close attention, and we know that it's going to be a knowledge-based exam in that there will be about 20 or so questions that are going to be knowledge-based. And this is based off of what you've learned this year. This is the easy stuff. These are the things you should already know. Straight out of the curriculum, one-off answers, really easy. Tip here is looking for those question marks. You should be able to identify what those question marks are in the sources. If you see a question mark, you know that the exam is going to be asking you about this. It's also going to be skill-based. So this is where we start to combine sources so that you can compare and contrast multiple sources. Usually, the questions will end asking what the overall issue is. So in terms of difficulty for this exam, we go from the easiest question down to the hardest question. And that last question is going to be, what do all of those sources have in common? Pay very close attention to these directing words. When you see them, underline them, bold them, circle them. You can write all over the exam anyway, so you might as well. So we're looking for best, mainly, most appropriately, most clearly, most closely, most concerned, most directly, most likely, most similar, most strongly. We're looking for these words. When you see them, highlight them, underline them, circle them, do whatever it is that you need to do to direct your attention to them. Now, over the past few years that I've been teaching, we've kind of come together and we know what we're going to be seeing on this test. We know there's going to be infographics, the webs and puzzles. These are usually your knowledge-based questions. These are usually going to be the first question of a source set. And you can see here, I'm not going to go through this source, but you can pause it on each of the following slides and you can take a look at the question with the source, and then the answer is identified. There's going to be perspectives of speakers, so we'll be pairing speakers together. Do they disagree or agree with something? And they will probably be linking to another source. So try and identify the issue that's being raised by those speakers. There's also going to be timelines. These could be knowledge-based. You could be filling in a question mark, but it could also be relating to an overall concept of what is taking place, of what the government is trying to test you on. After timelines, we know that there's going to be speech bubbles. These are very common in PATs to have those speech bubbles, and they are usually representing some facts or some views from different people. Always very popular are our political cartoons. We spent a lot of time working with political cartoons, so you should know how to read these cartoons. If you don't know how to read these cartoons, take a look at the social studies skills videos, and there's a video or two on how to read political cartoons. Maps are really popular. When you're dealing with maps, always take a look at legends and titles to try and find information there. And on this one, for example, there's some shaded regions. Maybe that might be of particular interest, and they might be questioning that. Hierarchies is something else that we will see. These tend to lend themselves to the first part of our curriculum when we're talking about Canada's political system, but really they could happen anywhere. So just be aware of that. After hierarchies, diagrams. Diagrams are really good for knowledge-based types of questions. So these are your question mark types of questions where you have to identify what the question marks are. After diagrams, we have some graphic organizers. And again, it's testing your knowledge and understanding. So these are knowledge-based. Very common to see those question marks there. Headlines are used a lot. And the headlines is going to be, how are these sources going to be pulled together? Which of these headlines are going to be similar to each other? Charts, we see a lot of the charts that are on there. Again, take a look at the titles of these charts. See what the x-axis might be, what the y-axis might be, if it's this particular line graph, for example. But you will see charts. We compare data quite a bit. And a lot of this is going to be understanding of key terms. So you have a key term, and then you'll have some definitions perhaps underneath or some viewpoints underneath. So definitely you want to know some of the key terms that are used there. And oftentimes these are going to be asking higher level thinking questions. So what is this source actually trying to identify? We'll have excerpts similar to a kind of like a newspaper article. We will definitely be seeing these on our PAT. And then every so often you will see notes. And usually this is in the form of pretending a student has written out some notes, and it's going to be relating to the other sources in some way, shape, or form. So that's what the test is going to be looking like, with a variety of different types of questions like what we just saw. So let's take a moment and let's review what we did in each of our units. Unit 1 was all about governance and rights. And we can take a look here. We've got the federal political system. That was Chapter 1. Chapter 2 was our judicial system. 3 was our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The recognition of collective rights was Chapter 4. And we ended Unit 1 with immigration policies. So for the federal government, you should know the 3 branches of government. Know what a monarchy is. Know what the cabinet ministers do and who the cabinet ministers are. How is the House of Commons set up along with the Senate? What's the difference between a majority and minority government? How do bills become laws? What's the process in which that takes place? And then finally, know what a lobbyist is, what a lobbyist does as well. Going into our justice system, what does fair and equitable mean? Take a look at that. Some of the legislation, some of the laws within our justice system. We spent a lot of time taking a look at the YCJA, which stands for the Youth Criminal Justice Act. How does that compare to the Criminal Code of Canada? What is a jury and who goes on to jury and what is their responsibility? Something called an advocacy group. We learned about 2 of them, the John Howard Society, Elizabeth Fry Society. How do those advocacy groups help in the justice system? What does it mean to rehabilitate and reintegrate? And always know your rights when you are arrested. Chapter 3 was all about our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Know your rights, your fundamental rights, your democratic rights, mobility, legal, and your equality rights. Know them. Know about the Constitution. Remember, it is the highest law in Canada. What was the past like? What was our history like before the Charter was introduced? And how does the Charter affect lawmaking? Moving on to Chapter 4, all about collective rights. These are for our Francophone, Anglophone, Métis, First Nations. Know about official language minority rights. So what happens if you are a French speaker outside of Quebec, for example? What is publicly funded? Know the history with the Royal Proclamation. There probably won't be anything specific about the Royal Proclamation, but knowing the history there will definitely help you. We talked about the numbered treaties, the Indian Act, and we spent some time with residential schools. Unit number 1 finished with immigration. Know the 4 different categories of immigration. Economic class immigrant being the largest category, followed by family, refugee, and then other. How do we use immigration to meet our workforce needs? We introduced the express entry system. The textbook talks about the point system, know the differences. And then finally, we ended off with the provincial nomination program. This brings us into unit number 2, economic systems of Canada and the United States. We spent time here talking about mixed and market economies. We spent a lot of time talking about mixed and market economies and the consumerism with quality of life and political decisions and economic systems. So from chapter 6, know what scarcity is. There's 3 components of scarcity: land, capital, and labor. What do all of those mean? Know the factors of production. And what happens when an economy shifts to the left or shifts to the right? Less government involvement, more government involvement, higher taxes or lower taxes. Know what happens when an economy moves left or right, and know how to place different countries on the economic continuum on the left and on the right. So you might have to identify where a planned economy goes or a market economy goes or a mixed economy goes. You might see some examples and you'd have to place them on that continuum. Know about supply and demand. Know about consumerism and crown corporations. Remember, crown corporations owned by the government, paid for by tax dollars. Unions are there, as well as what can strikes do. Chapter 7 was all about consumerism, how it affects our quality of life and standard of living. What's the difference between the two? Take a look. We spent some time focusing on marketing and advertisements. And then finally, what is a boycott? Chapter 8 was a fun one, social programs and taxation. The 3 biggest social programs that we spoke about in class: healthcare, pensions, and income assistance. How are those provided? What is it like in Canada compared to, let's say, the United States? How do we use taxes to pay for those social programs? We spent time taking a look at the federal government tax brackets as well as the provincial government tax brackets. What happens if you don't pay your taxes? That's tax evasion. And then also how that contributes to the underground economy, the black market, the hidden economy, whatever word you want to use there. Know about that. And then political party platforms. A lot of the political party platform stuff, that is from chapter 1. And then finally, chapter 9, we finish with environmental issues. Know about climate change, greenhouse gases, biodiversity, things like that. A lot of that will come from your science curriculum, but we applied that to social studies. How do governments respond to these environmental issues? And that's it. That is pretty much Social Studies 9 in a nutshell. Now remember, your test is 50 questions. It's source-based, and it's covering everything that we just talked about here in the curriculum. Review your notes. Everything that you need to know is in your notes. Approach this exam calmly. Have some water, maybe a snack. Definitely have a good night's rest before this exam. And if you have got any questions, then reach out and contact me, and we can help you out. Okay, good luck, everyone.